Hello and thanks for joining us for today's video. Just before we start, we want to tell you that we'll be releasing short videos daily. You can watch them here on YouTube, but we'll also be posting them on TikTok and Instagram. Links to both our Instagram account and TikTok account are in the description box. Thank you so much for your time. Without any further delay, here's this week's video. Number 3. The Gunthre Family. Timothy and Leslie Gunthre started dating in the 1960s while they were in high school. They later got married. They had 2 children, Julie, born in 1971, and Timothy, born in 1973. In 1976, the family moved into a house in Katonah, New York. After moving, the couple started having problems. In February 1977, 29-year-old Leslie moved out of the house and into her mother's home. On the afternoon of February 5, 1977, Leslie picked up 6-year-old Julie and 3-year-old Timothy Jr. from Timothy Sr.'s home. She was supposed to return them that evening. But after driving away, Leslie, Julie, and Timothy Jr. were never seen again. The next day, Timothy Sr. reported them missing. No trace of the mother and children was found. The 1974 300 Series Ford Maverick Leslie was driving also vanished. The car belonged to her mother. The prime suspect in the disappearance was Timothy Gunthre Sr. However, he has been cleared as a suspect. Although the couple was separated, they were still on good terms. Timothy Sr. fully cooperated with the investigation and spent a lot of time looking for his family. He also hired a private investigator. Another theory is that Leslie decided to disappear with the children, but there is no evidence to support this theory. She did not withdraw any money from her bank account or pack anything for herself and her children. The only money she had on her was the $10 her mother gave her for gas. When Leslie went missing, she was wearing her mother's boots, which were 2 sizes too small. One theory is that they ran away to join a cult. At the time of their disappearance, Leslie had been reading about alternative religions. But again, there is no evidence of this. Another theory is that they crashed into a nearby reservoir and the car sank. However, it was February in New York when they went missing, so the ice surfaces were frozen. Supposedly, the ice was solid enough to drive a car on. Also, had the car fallen through the ice, there would have been evidence of that. There are no clues as to what happened to the family after they drove away from Timothy Sr.'s home. It's as if Leslie drove the Ford Maverick through a hole in reality to be lost forever. Their family thinks, or at the very least hopes, they are still alive. But they are unsure why they have stayed out of contact. It's been over 45 years since Leslie, Julie, and Timothy Gunthre Jr. went missing. If they are still alive, Leslie would be 77, Julie would be 54, and Timothy Jr. would be 51. Number 2. The Men on the Sarah Joe. February 11th, 1979 started as another beautiful day in Hawaii. 5 local men, 31-year-old Peter Hanchett, 38-year-old Benjamin Kamala, 27-year-old Ralph Malachini, 27-year-old Scott Mormon, and 26-year-old Patrick Weisner, decided to take a fishing trip. That morning they set off from Hana, which is on the eastern coast of Maui. The boat, the Sarah Joe, was a 17-foot Boston whaler, and it belonged to Robert Malachini. All the men were experienced fishermen. That afternoon, while the men were out on the water, a storm suddenly rolled into the area. The 5 men never made it back to shore. The wind suddenly changed direction, and it's believed that the men were carried out to sea. Searches were conducted for the 5 men and the boat. Over 5 days, they searched 73,000 square miles, but no trace of the men or the Sarah Joe was found. 10 years went by. One person who helped in the early search for the men was a marine biologist named John Naughton. In September 1988, he was working 2,200 miles away from Hawaii in the Marshall Islands. The Marshall Islands are a sprawling chain of volcanic islands and coral atolls in the central Pacific Ocean. Naughton saw a boat on the shore of an atoll called Tananji. Naughton and his crew decided to check it out. When they got close, they saw that the boat was battered. Naughton also noticed that the registration numbers that were still on the boat indicated that it was registered in Hawaii. Naughton and his crew looked around the atoll. About 60 yards from the boat was a pile of rocks and a cross made from driftwood. In the pile of rocks, they saw a human jawbone. Also in the rocks, they saw something odd that puzzled investigators. It was a stack of papers that was 3 inches by 3 inches and about 3/4 of an inch thick. In between each piece of paper was a small square of tinfoil. Naughton reported the discovery to the Coast Guard. They confirmed it was the missing Sarah Jo. Using dental records, it was determined that it was the remains of one of the 5 missing men, 27-year-old Scott Mormon. There was no other trace of the other 4 men in the area. Experts said that the boat could have drifted to the atoll in about 3 months. What's bizarre is that, in 1985, 6 years after the men went missing, the U.S. government surveyed the atoll. If that's the case, why wasn't the boat and the shallow grave discovered when it was surveyed? Another major mystery is what happened to the other 4 men. If Moorhead was buried, it suggests that at least one other man made it to the atoll. One possible explanation is that Chinese men illegally fishing in the area found the body in the boat. They couldn't report it, so they buried the remains. But it seems unlikely they would have built a cross. Another major question is, what does the paper and tinfoil mean? Many people think that learning its significance could help solve the mass disappearance. No trace of the other 4 men has ever been found. The families hope that one day they'll know what happened to the men. It's been over 46 years since the men on the Sarah Jo went missing, and we may never know what happened to them. Number 1. Flight 19. At 2:10 p.m. on December 5, 1945, 5 Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, collectively known as Flight 19, took off from Naval Air Force Station Fort Lauderdale in Florida. There were 14 men on the 5 planes. They were conducting a training exercise. They were to fly a triangle pattern over the Bahamas. When they took off, weather conditions were good. The skies were clear and the seas were calm. But shortly after takeoff, the 5 planes had problems with their compasses. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, kept in radio contact with the base. Taylor and the other pilots became disoriented and couldn't determine their location. The last transmission from Lieutenant Taylor came at 4 p.m. He said that they planned to fly west until they found land. The 5 planes with the 14 men aboard disappeared and have never been seen again. Over 300 planes and ships were used to search for the planes and the men, but no trace of them has ever been found. There are several theories about what happened to the men. The most logical explanation is that they got lost and crashed into the ocean when they ran out of fuel. While this is very plausible, what many people find strange is that the compasses on all 5 planes stopped working. However, TBM Avengers were notorious for their unreliable compasses and electrical systems. But it is strange that all 5 compasses failed simultaneously. This has led to speculation that something paranormal happened to the men. One notable aspect is that the men and the planes disappeared in an area called the Bermuda Triangle, or the Devil's Triangle. Flight 19 was the first major disappearance in the post-World War II era. There has been speculation that something in the area, like unusual magnetic anomalies or weather patterns, affect the instruments on airplanes and boats. However, researchers have found nothing unusual about the area. Some people do not think there is a logical explanation for the disappearance of the men and the 5 planes. They think that something out of science fiction happened to the men. This includes entering a wormhole or a time warp, or aliens abducted them. But once again, there is no evidence to prove any of these theories. It's been 79 years since Flight 19, also known as the Lost Patrol, went missing. It is considered one of the greatest aeronautical mysteries in history. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, we'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. Also, don't forget to watch our shorts on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Once again, thank you for watching.